May 9th Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee meeting. Can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing, the presentation? Excellent. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump in. So as usual, public comment is reserved for the end. If you are able to raise your hand on Zoom, if you're an attendee, please do that if you want to speak, or you can email me if you're unable to do that, and I will check my email before we start public comment. Just a quick reminder, the public comment period is for providing input. You can pose questions that you'd like the committee to discuss at a later meeting, but generally we're not going to be answering questions directly from the public. So as usual, we will start with our data updates. We've done some revamping of these slides based on input that we got at the last meeting. Some of them will be familiar, but there's also some new slides. So this is a new slide here. This is the licensure rate and the number of licenses and listings that we have. So this blue line and the number here is the number of licenses that we have in each month. And then this number here and the orange bar is the number of listings that we are able to identify online. And this green line here throughout is the licensure rate, right? So the proportion of listings that, well, the proportion of listings that could be associated with a license. So one of the things to note is that in the orange bar, it's often difficult to tell if it doesn't have a license number, whether it actually does have a license, and it's just not posted. So we might be over counting the listings. So this number would tend to be lower than it might actually be in actuality. So just wanted to kind of give you a general sense of the slide. This information started to be collected in 2020. It dropped off during COVID. This has to be calculated manually. And so this is not something that was automated, and that's why you see the breaks here. We've started now to recalculate it every month starting in September of last year. And you can see that the trend line has been pretty consistent. We don't expect that it would be a huge jump or a huge decline in these break periods. But you can see it hovers around 80%. So that's our licensure rate. And moving forward, we will just see from September of 22 moving forward and what that looks like. Does anybody have any questions, comments about this slide, or can we just wanted to introduce it as a new slide that'll provide some information in a visual format for us. Great. So these are STR application processing month to month. I know we had some questions about how long it takes to process an application. So this is a very new measure that we've created, or that we're going to start showing here in these meetings. You can see that there was quite a big growth here around July of last year. Our department, our short-term rental investigations department, had some turnover at that time, and so there was some growth in the time that it took. That's fallen way down now to less than 2 weeks, essentially, month to month, what it takes to process an application. And then this again provides you the number of applications submitted, the number of applications completed within the same month. So you'll see on the next slide that most of our applications are done within 30 days, and almost half are done within a week. And then again, the green line is the average number of days that it takes to process an application. So again, we had some challenges last year, but that number is way down, and we'll continue to provide this information in these meetings so that you can track that.
Can I ask a question, Alex?
Sure, absolutely.
So back 2 slides, when we say our licensure rate is right around 80%, that's considered like a gold star, knowing that there are some duplications and there are the variables at play there, as far as how the city would look at its hosting community?
Sure. So we obviously always want to have higher and higher rate. I'd love to have 100% licensure, but we are very proud of that number in terms of our program and it being the ease of allowing people to apply and getting through the system, and making sure that we're tracking and licensing short-term rentals and getting the ones that aren't licensed removed. So we are very proud of that number. It's something we should celebrate as a city and as a community. I think a lot of other jurisdictions are turning to Denver for our program as a model of how to track this. And I think the primary residence goes a long way towards helping with that, because other cities that don't have primary residency also have a hard time, getting people licensed and then tracking them as they move forward.
And then the next slide, while the time to process has significantly dropped from a year ago, does the department have a goal for how long on average they'd like licenses to take to be processed? And I'm curious if it is that 13-day average, or if it's lower than that, or if that is even a metric that the department strives towards.
I can answer that. Hi, this is Erica. We are striving to get the average time down as much as possible. We have had some reorganization in our department, obviously with the new residential rental license coming on. We've had a lot of folks that were at the front tech counter moving to the back of house, getting promoted. We've had to fill those spots. We also needed to fill some new spots that were created by that program. So I think that's probably what you're seeing here in the kind of most recent uptick, but we are trying to keep, we do KPI, key performance indicator readouts among our team leaders monthly, just to make sure that we are staying on top of what our goals are, and that, obviously we're going to have, interesting situations that come up that take a little longer. We're always going to have, some training, but that is a number that we're trying to keep fairly low. We do try to process a good bit of our applications across the board in 7 days or less, or get a response in 7 days or less. The average time obviously is going to be influenced by those particular scenarios, but to the extent we can keep that average pretty low month over month, that is the goal. So hopefully in the next 12 months, you'll see that rate, vary at a much less, how am I trying to say this? There'd be a much lower variation in the rate of that average going from month to month.
Great. Thanks, Erica.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I had a question on the previous slide, the same one. Okay, that one there. Maybe it's just because it's toward the end of the day for me, but this isn't making sense. Every month we complete fewer applications than are submitted. Shouldn't those numbers equal out at some point? Otherwise, it appears that the amount by which the blue line exceeds the orange one indicates that there's a lot that we're not doing. What am I missing here?
So this last month is sort of an anomaly. Not quite sure the difference there between completed and submitted. The bars are closer for most of these months, and it's just this last one where there's a big difference. And what's important here is the average number of days to complete these applications. These applications are taking longer than
Right.
So I think
my question is, like, if I look at May 22, the very first one is 205 applications submitted, 183 completed. So the difference between 183 and 205, they would carry over to June, but we only completed 205. We took in another 240. So the cumulative total by which the blue line exceeds the orange amounts to several thousand applications. So I know I'm missing something here.
Yeah.
What am I? We're not completing.
So a lot of we do have and obviously, right, like they're not always completed within the same month that they are submitted, right? So sometimes, like, for example, from July of 22 to August of 22, right, there were 232 submitted in July, and we completed 246 in August, right? So there sometimes the submitted rate is higher. However, there's also the thing to keep in mind is it's not always going to match up with the ones that we processed that month or completed that month are the ones that are submitted.
And I wouldn't expect that, but I would expect that at some point we complete more than we took in.
Not necessarily,
right?
because
we have the prior month backlog.
not necessarily, because some folks withdraw their applications. Sometimes we ask for additional information and people never send it, right? After a year of no information from the applicant, that application administratively closes. So those are ones that will never be completed, even if they're submitted. And so, you know, we do see some of that.
That's the explanation I'm looking for. So the excess represents possibly applications that were never completed or pursued or withdrawn.
Yeah, a whole mix of different scenarios there, but yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Sorry, real quick, this is Dan, just keying off that. So there's really no backlog currently, is that right? I think that's another way to ask the same question that Kevin was getting to.
So I guess one caveat to that, right, is that it depends how you classify backlog, right? We've got a whole pool of applications that we are, you know, and Alex has a slide coming up on this, but if we have asked for additional information and we're waiting for that, right, like that is never going to be completed. But I wouldn't count that as a backlog because it's not showing in our system. Like we're waiting for something for the applicant, right? There's nothing that the applicant isn't waiting for us to do something. We're waiting for the applicant to do something. So yeah, this is, no, not this one. There's another slide that will also talk about like how many we have withdrawn. But as far as backlog, right, I mean, I think what we would look at is to look at these numbers, right? Which is how long is it taking us to complete applications? And what these graphs show is that the bulk of our applications, both new and renewal, are completed in less than 30 days. So the blue is under 7 days or less. And so for new applications, just about half of those are completed in under a week. For renewal applications, it's a little closer to 40%. But then another 35 and 32% respectively are finished in 8 to 30 days. So that gives us a total close to 80% on both of those that are processed in under a month, right? We have, I'm sorry? Nope, okay. Just feedback. And so then we've got a smaller chunk, right, that take a little bit longer, 31 to 60 days. That's 11% of our new applications and a little bit more of our renewal applications, about 1 in 5. And we did look at specifically that breakout. Those are averaging taking about 45 days, right? So it's on the lower end of that 31 to 60. And then we've got a really small portion that are taking longer than 60 days. Now, the other caveat about this data here is that this is a snapshot of the last year, right? So this is going to include applications that were taking a long time, 8 months ago, like you saw earlier in the slide deck. So again, over time, we hope to see these trends continue and that blue portion get larger and larger and the red portion get larger. And then the green, yellow, orange, and teeny tiny green, be almost non-existent. As much as that, some of that's outside of our control, right? If again, we're waiting for an applicant for a couple of months to respond with some information, that's going to push them into that other bucket too. So, for the most part, though, we think, this shows a good trend.
Great questions. Hopefully
Cindy's got her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Just a little bit further on that whole avenue. Do you find that most people in new applications and renewals are understanding what they need to supply and are doing it? And then I would imagine, as you told us before, there's some triggers that you ask for additional information. Are most people getting back right away with that?
It's hard to make a generalization on that, Cindy. Okay. One thing I can say, I know we've gotten some questions, right? Like, for example, we always, if we think that, something might not be an applicant's primary residence based on the information they've submitted, we always send them an email notifying them of that before we issue a denial, basically saying, hey, the information you gave us, we're starting to think it might not be your primary residence. Is there anything else you'd like to submit? Kind of a last chance, like, maybe you just submitted the bare minimum, your driver's license and, your documents, but maybe there's more to the story. We've heard here at this committee several times that people are digital nomads. They have unique circumstances. They want to be able to share those with us. And so we do that as kind of a benefit of the doubt, like, hey, here's your chance, like, let us know. And we'll sometimes people get questioned about that, like, well, what do you need from me? And so we always refer them to the factors, right? Like, if you've got information about any of this, any of the stuff that can be considered by the director, feel free to send it in. I've told people too, like, if you have a narrative, right, like you can just respond with some information that will help paint a picture rather than just the documents you submitted. But that is always, we do get some questions about that, to varying degrees of understandability, but it is in the ordinance and we can't give legal advice. So aside from kind of giving them the list and a little bit of, like, if you have unique circumstances, like, tell us what they are, tell us why this is your primary residence if you want to, giving them that opportunity. That's kind of and that's, I think, where I've been pulled into a lot of questions myself. But I don't know that I can make any other, like, generalizations about, are they understanding? I think it's mostly straightforward because mostly it's form uploads.
Great. I just wanted to make sure everything was clearer to people as they apply. That's great.
I will say, if you do find confusing language, sometimes this happens. We actually had a councilwoman reach out to us, her office, and saying, hey, this constituent got this email, it's a little confusing. And, we reread it and we worked it. And, within a couple of days of getting the email, we had some clear language posted. So if you are seeing something or you're getting something, you're saying, hey, this is really confusing, let us know. We are always open to making those continuous improvements.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the discussion. These are helping. So this is a slide we've seen before. This is the final disposition of applications. Roughly 80% are being issued, 2% denied, about 7% have been withdrawn, and then about 10% have been administratively closed after a year of inactivity. So vast majority are being approved.
And Councilman, that gets to your question about the ones that aren't, rolling over. Essentially, we've got 17% that are, either withdrawn or administratively closed.
Yeah. So those ones with the really long timelines going to fall more in this category than in the still being processed category. Another slide that we are used to seeing, this is the 311 trend. So again, big picture here is that most of the questions are about applications. We're not receiving, not much about administrative citations or complaints about properties. Generally, it's just to ask questions about the application process. Here, trends by topic, again, over year, same deal. We're seeing a growth in questions about applications. There's no questions or comments on there. We'll keep moving. This is yes.
A quick question, Alex. Of those few property complaints you have, what are they mostly about?
We can look into that. I don't have that information.
Oh, okay.
Unless you have anything on that.
I do not. We pulled this data from, like, a dashboard, so we can get information for next time on what the most common property complaints are.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Erica, I think that would be super helpful, just because I think it would be good to know what kinds of property complaints we're receiving in case there's something we need to do differently or some changes that we need to make. Having that specific data, I think, would be super helpful. I know it's a little bit of added work for you all, but we'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing.
And Erica, I'm sorry, also adding extra work. Would it be possible to also maybe see the top application questions as well? Because I'm just wondering of the outreach that we do to our hosts, if we can kind of incorporate some of that into our messaging as well.
Yeah, I can definitely ask our data team to kind of see if there are subcategories that, because these are sorted by 311 as they get the calls, they put them in these buckets. So I'm not sure if the application questions or complaints have, like, kind of subcategories, but we can certainly ask. And if not, we can maybe do like a deep dive point in time and see, which ones are coming up again and again, and maybe give, if 311 doesn't have the categories, maybe we can give them some additional subcategories to help us collect that data.
Awesome. Any other questions there? Great. I will definitely look into that to see what are the top complaints and the top questions about the applications. So this is a new slide. We had questions about time that it takes to get back to folks when they submit a question. So these are through Salesforce, our customer management tool, a management system. And so we have data now for 21 and 22, complete years. So the average days to close is the average number of days between when the case is created through either a phone call or an email, and it's resolved so that an answer is provided or the situation is resolved in some way or another. So that's gone, up by a day, 13% change. And then volume has gone up by significantly from 21 to 22. And then first call resolution has gone down a bit. So that's the ability for the 311 operators to answer the questions themselves, right? Whether it's a phone call or an email. So I did want to note that there was a lot of turnover in 311. I think almost their entire workforce turned over last year at some point. And so big change there. And then short-term rental calls are some of the more complicated cases. And so they're actually trained last on that because it is one of the more complicated areas. And it's also just difficult to resolve the questions. It's often, requires somebody from our office to actually answer the question, or if it's a specific situation about a specific application, 311's not going to be able to resolve that. And so those are some of the reasons why you're seeing those numbers. But overall, pretty quick to close our Salesforce cases, about a week and a half. Right. And again, feel free to jump in with questions and comments. I just want to move quickly because we do have some good information for you about tourism. So still working on developing some data for the questions that we're asking about the structure of short-term rentals. So, is it a single family home or is it a condo? Are you renting your ADU? Are you renting your whole place or just one room? Those are some questions that we're going to start asking and get some data for you guys to see. Lodgers tax, again, another familiar slide. You can see very high for March. April was not quite ready to present from Department of Finance, let us know. And so we don't have the numbers from last month, but some good numbers here for March. Year to date, almost 4 million for the year, and then representing about 12.3% of lodgers tax as a whole. All right, moving on to current events. Again, I'm going to move quickly here just because I want to get to the tourism slides. So globally, demand and supply of short-term rentals is still growing in the U.S. Strong growth there. There's now a trend towards some short-term rentals getting certified as sustainable and having sustainable practices. Airbnb, and then unfortunately, there was this tragic event in Canada. There was a fire at an unpermitted listing that had actually several listings within it. And so Airbnb is going to be pulling those listings at the request of the city of Quebec after a tragedy there. So those are kind of some global general issues to discuss. Nationally, there's some states that are preempting or limiting local regulation of short-term rentals. There's some other jurisdictions that are taking the opposite tact and are taxing or otherwise regulating them in some way, in some cases banning them outright. And then in North Texas, in Texas, you've got kind of a dual thing where you've got some cities that are trying to regulate and then the state that's trying to preempt. So, ongoing challenges there between states and local municipalities in terms of how to regulate short-term rentals. Locally, Grand Junction is considering some regulations. Lakewood recently adopted a primary residence requirement for their short-term rentals. Aspen and Pitkin counties, the regulations that they adopted last year are starting to show results in terms of tightening the flow of short-term rentals that had been a challenge for them. And then there was a state bill here to help the rural counties regulate short-term rentals, to give them some authorities there. So feel free to take a look at those and read, read about what's going on in the world of short-term rentals. But now we can move on to our main topic, which is tourism in Denver and the short-term rental market. We are going to have Jeff Roof from Visit Denver speak first and give us some information about tourism in Denver in general. And if you're ready, Jeff, we'll get started.
Are you going to do the slides or can I move them?
I can do the slides if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Go ahead. Next slide. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Kind of just going to give you a general overview of tourism. Obviously, we do a lot of analysis, get a lot of data from the hotels, et cetera. But in general, as tourism goes and the more successful we are there, that has a direct correlation to the short-term rental market. So we like to start with, we sit down and say, what's the word of the year? You can see in 2020, it was unprecedented. Move to transition. Last year was definitely complicated. If you think about last year, pretty incredible. We started under Omicron, and then the lid blew off of everything and ended up with a record collection of lodgers tax in 2022. So it really went from 0 to 100 in a pretty fast pace last year. The good news is we see 23, the word we're using is growth, that we're definitely going to have continue the trend that we saw midway through last year, through the end of the year, into the first quarter of this year. Next slide, please. Definitely built up, pent up demand. 85% of American travelers have trips planned. They plan on taking 3.5 leisure trips in the next 12 months. Interestingly, they spend over a couple of hours planning and researching after they've arrived at the destination. So it's important that all the different things we're doing from a marketing standpoint, not only to bring them to Denver, but once they get into Denver, all the things to see and do, et cetera. Some of the pet peeves, as you can see there, flight delays, price gouging, dirty hotel rooms, road construction. Next slide. With all that said, we have seen in the recent month or so a little bit of headwinds. We see that some of the travel has dipped a couple of points as they plan out into the future. And next slide. We can see what this is the impacts, what's impacting their decisions and how that's the percentage that's dropped over the last month. So you can see that airfare, inflation, financial, those are big concerns to people. So while we're encouraged and off to a great start for 2023, we do have concerns as the year moves along, particularly towards the end of the year. Next slide. Domestically, business travel continues to recover. We are dealing with people returning to the office, et cetera. I mentioned the pent up demand, and that's helping in the business world that we get, they want to have more face-to-face meetings, and that's what we definitely want. The conference business has been slow, but it's picking up as the year progresses. So lastly, workforce challenges are prevalent throughout, particularly in the hospitality industry. Next slide. Overall, you can see that the domestic leisure travel, that's really what has anchored our recovery. It was very strong last year. That will continue. It will slow down a bit this year as compared to last year with some of those indicators that I had talked about. The biggest piece, the international piece, has really struggled to come back. Hopefully with the lifting of all the restrictions here in the next couple of days will help us in the international piece. That's important. The international traveler definitely spends a lot more money when they're in market. So those are the things that we like to see. Next slide. Now, as downtown goes, really goes all of the rest of the Denver area, not only Denver, but the Denver metro area. So, you know, the safety concerns for our visitors downtown and our convention center visitors is always top of mind with us. Next slide. So last year, collaborating, you know, with the mayor, the local, state, federal agencies, launched the Public Safety Action Plan in October. And then in November, the Downtown Denver Partnership launched the Together We Will, really trying to put a focus on downtown and seeing what we can do to move the needle, to make downtown, get it back to the vibrant downtown that it was several years ago. Next slide. Along with that, as part of the safety program, working with the hotels, et cetera, we found that one of the big barriers was the lack of communication between the hotels and the different agencies. So we actually stepped in and purchased radios for 21 hotels. In addition to that, we're funding 2 dedicated DDP ambassadors, the people in the blue suits. And then during the convention seasons and various conventions, we're really upping the off-duty police presence. So we're not only, you know, working to try to make downtown a better experience, but we're actually spending quite a bit of money to help support all the different programs that we have. Next slide. Big bright spot. Without the airport, I don't know where we would be. At one point last year, we were the 3rd busiest airport in the world. We naturally are going to slide down this list. I think we were 18th as we were in 2019. We're currently at 6. We will drop back a bit as the international business you know, starts to settle in and that comes back. But without the airport, obviously, we would be in a world of hurt. So the airport is very, very vital to us. Next slide. So opportunities that we have is, you know, continue to increase the small and mid-sized meeting demand, really trying to activate different demand drivers, particularly during the summer, sports, concerts, et cetera. The convention center expansion will be completed by the end of this year. We have a little space there. I don't think the first group actually goes into there until next spring. Just wanted to make sure that it was fully ready to go. Obviously, the next phase of the National Western Center coming along. And then, you know, exciting changes. We've got the elections almost finalized. We'll know what everything looks like in after the June runoffs. And then as we work with the new mayor and the new council, I think there's definitely going to be some good excitement and opportunities for us to take us in maybe new, better directions. So next slide. The good news is we are off to a roaring start in 2023. Definitely our lead volume for group business has been through the roof through the first 4 months of the year. It's been unbelievable. The site visits are nearly back to 2019 levels. So the big thing here is that we continue to see good demand. The different meeting groups, et cetera, have really been in contact with us and want to make Denver part of their rotation, et cetera. So that is very encouraging. Next slide. And this is just looking at the groups as compared to 2019. We look at the group business, which was a little slow to recover, getting back to those 2019 levels, and that bodes well for particularly for the lodgers tax, et cetera. Next slide. And again, attendance to conventions and the total rooms really starting to get ourselves back to where we were. So I had mentioned that the leisure tourism is really what kept us afloat through the pandemic, and last year. The group business is definitely starting to come back, and that will continue to grow for us. Next slide. And I'd mentioned this is just a little snapshot of the site visits that we're doing. So obviously, big dip there during the pandemic, but really starting to come back. These are groups that are interested in Denver. They bring people in. Our staff spend 2 or 3 days, show them everything to see and do in Denver. So this is a good indicator of what business is to come. Next slide. And along with that, you see the pace of the convention business. So a very strong 23, 24, got some work to do in 27, but we'll definitely fill those gaps. But, converting all those site visits, et cetera, into definites and getting that group business here. Next slide. This is the group occupancy, talking a little bit more about that. And you can tell that we really focus on the group business, that, making sure that we're filling the hotels, filling the Colorado Convention Center. So seeing downtown in 2019, 22%, Q1 of this year at 17%. So we are continuing to, work our way back to where we were before the pandemic. Next slide. This is just a little snapshot of all the business that we have coming in. Over 80,000 attendees in May, June, and July. So lots and lots of activities. It was quite busy down here this past weekend. Richard and I were just out at lunch today, and lots and lots of attendees out, having lunch, et cetera. So good to see. Next slide. And again, talking about the last piece, the international focus, we did get a grant from the state. We partnered with the Colorado Tourism Office for a grant this year and for next year to really, and what we're doing is putting direct reps in Canada, Mexico, Germany, France, and the UK to really focus on these areas to see as that business opens up, to get those international travelers back to Denver. Next slide. These are just some of the things that we do on an advertising basis. We've got the winter base camp where that's specifically targeted towards the visitor. What that is go have fun, play. There's so much to do within an hour or so of Denver, and then come back to Denver, spend the night, dine. We also do regional events, et cetera, where we're really pushing the Denver in the surrounding area. drive traffic and getting people to come in. So I had mentioned earlier in the deck that we're trying to really get people not only to come here, but then once they get here, they continue to plan, and it's a very fluid situation. Next slide. That's it.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate the information. If it's okay with the group, we can jump into Alex's presentation from Airbnb and then do questions at the end. Or Dana, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, was it written on my face? I was just curious. From a Visit Denver perspective, I know at times we've bid on hosting major events, whether it's the Final Four, X Games, political conventions, World Cup, and so forth. What are the factors that these big hosts consider when choosing a city to bring their event to?
Yeah, a lot of it, is, how many hotels do we have? Proximity in downtown, we usually do very good there. What venues do we have? I know that, like, for example, we're going after rugby in 2031, I believe. So just those are the big pieces, is being able to host it. What are the things to do, and what's the venue you have? Then a lot of it comes down to money. It's a very, very competitive environment. Some of these states, like Texas, have coffers that you would not believe, that they can go out and pretty much just buy the business. So when it comes to those events, sometimes you're just not even in the ballpark with some of them. So, but Denver continues to be, very attractive for a variety of things. The hosting, the NCAA, et cetera. We can't do the Final Four; the arena's not big enough. But getting those, earlier rounds, et cetera, those are definitely attractive.
And I know traditionally Visit Denver has spoken the vernacular when touching upon lodging as hotels, but does Visit Denver also position our short-term rental inventory as part of our, selling features?
Not really. I mean, it's there and available, but, we're generally focused on the destination itself, not specifically even, we have the hotel rooms, et cetera, when we're booking group business, but when we're going after the leisure and that, it's really about the destination and all the things to see and do. And I can tell you, and you've showed the numbers, were shown earlier, 10, 12% of the total lodger's tax. That's a fair amount. So that is obviously, it all counts to all of us. And to me, that's just more inventory and more choice that we have for people that come. That I can tell you personally, that's when I travel most of the time, that I'm staying in short-term rental. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you know of any future events that Denver is bidding on?
The rugby in 2031 is the big one.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Great questions, great discussion. Anybody else want to jump in here, pressing things? I mean, we'll have time at the end as well if others have questions for Jeff, because this is really good information. But all right. Well, moving on, we'll hear now from Alex April from Airbnb. And Alex, again, I'll just click through the slides here if you just want to let me know when to change.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks for the presentation, Jeff. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Alex April, and I'm a senior policy manager for Airbnb, based just down the road from you guys, born and raised Colorado Springs. So wanted to discuss two major questions today. The first being, what feedback is Airbnb hearing from short-term rental users in Denver, as well as sustainability work that Airbnb has recently completed or is currently working on. So let's go through the first one. The feedback that we are hearing from our short-term rentals in Denver. And I first wanted to chat about our guests. And so just I'm just going to go through several different stats, which I think all of you will hopefully find interesting. So we had nearly 400,000 guest arrivals within 2022. And, you know, definitely seeing those increases of guests, especially post-pandemic and kind of that the year of growth, as Jeff spoke about earlier, but also just kind of interesting, but 60% of our guests incoming to Denver are also women. Next slide, please. So we have a survey that goes out to hosts and guests yearly. And so we wanted to share some statistics on why our guests in Denver, you know, what was their primary reason for coming to Denver? And so 35% stated that they were visiting friends or family, 25% purely just vacation, while also 15% attending a special event. So Jeff, of course, happy to coordinate in the future of any upcoming kind of big events like that. Next slide, please. We also asked, you know, reasons why our guests also decided to rent an Airbnb rather than another type of accommodation as well. And this one was really interesting to me. So 60% of guests said that they chose Airbnb because of a convenient location. So maybe outside of more of those kind of popular tourist areas, but also 30% said hotels do not offer required amenities, so a kitchen, shared space, etc. While also 30% of folks also wanted to be able to save money. We also asked our guests recommendations from, are you getting recommendations from your hosts in Denver? Kind of, you know, what does that look like? And so 70% of our guests say that they were recommended local or nearby restaurants, cafes, close to the listing. 40% are recommended cultural sites and activities, museums, that sort of thing as well. And 40% of guests visited places that they were recommended to them by the host of the listing that they were staying in. So this is a really great point to be able to show with, you know, with Airbnbs and with the short-term rentals that people are really spending the money within the neighborhood that they are staying in and supporting restaurants, cafes, and other small businesses outside some more of those business areas as well. Next slide, please. Now I also did just want to talk about our hosts a little bit as well. So our users, I know tourism was big and I wanted to speak to tourism, but I also want to be able to highlight our hosts also in Denver. And so this was, you know, one of the surveys that went out to our hosts this last year. So 45% of our hosts do say that the income has on Airbnb has helped them stay in their home, which is huge. 55% of hosts say that hosting allows them to meet the rising costs of living, and 40% of our hosts in Denver have a total household income of under $100,000 as well. And I know I'm kind of flying through here, so if there's any questions, we'll make sure we'll have some time at the end. But I also, you know, the question of what sustainability efforts is Airbnb working on or has recently completed. So I wanted to highlight 3 different things. So our commitment to be net zero by 2030. So we want to be able to reduce carbon emissions with our business operations and matching 100% of our global office electricity use with renewable energy. We're also working with our global host community to increase adoption of sustainable practices. So interestingly enough, you'll see some stats on the next slide of, you know, what hosts are already doing, but we are also working to create just more sustainable hosting. And so we actually have our first US energy efficiency pilot that launched in Massachusetts last week, which offers weatherization. So it's $500 towards the cost of weatherization upgrades like air sealing, wall installation, as well as then offering $2,000 towards the cost of a high efficiency heat pump, so which can both heat and cool a home as well. So, and if there are questions on that pilot, it did just start last week. So I think, maybe in a couple of STRAC meetings, we'll have a better update on how the pilot's going and updates there. But also partnering with organizations to promote more sustainable travel. Example was last year we partnered with the Mexican Magic Towns Association, where we promoted domestic travel in local communities and nearby small businesses as well. Next slide, please. And last but not least, how Airbnb Denver hosts support sustainability. So 65% of our hosts in Denver are providing information on local public transportation. 50% are using environmentally friendly cleaning products, and 55% are recycling and composting and having that available within the listing as well. It's something, as a company that we're definitely going to strive to increase these numbers, but we're very proud that we are on the upswing and are able to increase sustainability awareness as well. And that is all it for me.
Awesome. Great information. Really appreciate both presentations. I'll open it up to questions. Councilwoman Sori, I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Alex. And thanks, other Alex. Question for you, Alex, April, about the Airbnb data. That was super interesting. Just curious whether you were able to capture any feedback from your hosts on are there gaps that the city could be filling, or are there needs that we're unaware of? Were you able to capture any of that information to sort of identify opportunities for better support or better partnership or those kinds of things?
We weren't. We didn't, but that's actually something, especially kind of looking at some of the statistics that other Alex shared with incoming questions, that I would be really interested in. So maybe for future surveys and outreach, we'll be able to incorporate that. But I think that would be,
yeah, it would be super helpful to know that kind of information to identify opportunities to better partner. So if you are planning on doing something like that in the future, it'd be great, if you're sending out another survey. Other follow-up question was on one of the slides you had shown some of the data for Denver. Curious whether you compared that to, go back a couple more. Sorry.
Yes. I think it was two more before this one. I think it was, yeah.
Yeah. So sort of the makeup of your guests, and then it's the two slides after this. Were you able to determine whether this data is sort of in line with other data, either within other cities in the state of Colorado or in other major cities that we're sort of competing with for tourism? Like, I don't know exactly what those cities would be, but probably not a New York, but those smaller second tier cities like Boston or Philadelphia or Houston or any of those kinds of, San Francisco, like smaller cities like Denver is this data in line with what you see there?
That is a really good question. Let me follow up. That's a fantastic question though. Yeah, I'll absolutely follow up and see.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to know, particularly if you can go forward one more slide, Alex. I think the primary reasons for stay, that would be helpful to know whether that is in line with other cities. And if you can go one more slide forward, please, Alex. I think it'd just be useful to know. I think it would be valuable for us to understand our market a little bit better, our Denver Airbnb market a little bit better, to be able to compare, people who are choosing to do their luxury travel or whatever in other cities, why we might be able to glean a little bit more information from a comparison. So if you would be willing to do that, I think it'd be super valuable for future info.
Absolutely. I can put that on my to-do list and have that ready for next time.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Alex. Really appreciate your willingness to jump in on those questions. And Cindy, I see you've got your hand up, but real quick, since the councilwoman raised the question, Jeff, if you're still on the call, do you know what other cities we generally compete with in terms of tourism? Is it other areas?
Yeah, you mentioned, our peers are, San Diego, Seattle, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago. So those are the big convention cities, and those are really all the ones that we compete with. Nashville has rapidly gotten on the radar. They came from pretty much nowhere a little over 5 years ago to right there with their convention business. So
thank you. Really appreciate that. That's helpful for context for the committee. And then Cindy, go ahead and jump in.
Okay. I have three questions for Jeff. What is the Denver hotel capacity? And then what's the Denver Metro hotel capacity?
There's about a little over 25,000 in city and county of Denver, and just over 50,000 in the metro area.
Great. And then what's the hotel capacity running right now?
In the springtime, we're probably about 70% now. We will get into the mid to upper 80s in the summer, and fingers crossed may even hit that 90 threshold.
Thank you. Great question.
And I do have a couple other questions.
Sure.
Sustainability. I'm reading a lot in the travel magazines that people are beginning to question hotel sustainability, building, heating, cooling, that kind of thing. And I do know that they are now demanding that you don't have to change the towels every day. What do you see in trends in that, Jeff?
That's the same thing. The hotels, the convention center itself, we all do. There's a certification program. Denver's one of we're fortunate. We're seen as a very sustainable city, and so both our hotel partners, the convention center, that is top of mind with them. So they are always working with those different standards to make sure that they are green certified, et cetera, so that because that's a big deal. That's a big deal in our world to be able to promote that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, great questions. Really appreciate the conversation here. I've got a question for Alex April as well about the, but before that, I was just curious if Dana, if you were aware of or familiar with the short-term rental capacity, if that's something that your organization tracks.
No, but I feel like either AirDNA or Key Data could probably provide some numbers that might be an estimate for all listings across the board.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you for that. And I just also wanted to draw attention to the fact that our primary residence requirement is also sort of a sustainable practice, because we're ensuring that these spaces are continuously occupied, and not empty or for certain times. But Alex, I did want to ask, the weatherization program that you mentioned in Massachusetts, I know it's new, but curious if you're aware. So this is weatherization that can be, is it for all homes? Is it for short-term rentals? Or just curious about the short-term rental connection there. Because, sorry, just to context the question, because we had talked about disability access. And one of the issues that we had run into was, well, how do we ensure that these are, grants would be used for short-term rentals or for actual, guests with disabilities and that kind of thing. So just curious about that.
Yeah, so this is a program, I can send more information, but we're partnering so that this program is specifically for our Airbnb hosts.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah, I'd love to get some more information about that to see how that's modeled, how that's set up.
Happy to
see if, something that we could play with. Cindy, did you still have your hand up from before, or did you have a new question?
No, I have a new question, and this is for both Jeff and Alex. I wanted to find out, with the rise in prices lately, what do you both see as the different types of accommodations, the percentage of increase in cost?
Like in a nightly, like the raise of nightly rates or something like that, Cindy?
I would assume, yeah, that would be how you would have to compare them. Yes.
I would have to get back to you. I'm not entirely sure on that.
Yeah, I agree. That's a little bit. That's our biggest, that was part of my, the headwinds of the financial, of how is that going to impact the rates. Generally, the rate will really just be dictated by demand, and it's the rate isn't as strong as it was in 2019. I can tell you, we've added more supply, and we've been able to absorb that supply in the last 3 or 4 years, and that's what took us to the record lodgers tax in 2022, and we're actually on pace to eclipse that again this year. So it's a bit of a rate is fluctuates, and it really is what the market, based on demand. That's why the group business, and I droned on a bit about it. When the group business, we've shown that when we get strong business in the downtown, we've done compression studies that helps the entire area. That what if downtown is strong, Cherry Creek out to Central Park, the airport, et cetera, really everybody benefits from that.
Mm-hmm. And Cindy, this is a follow-up, kind of that rising cost of living, I think, is definitely one variable, but just to kind of double down on what Jeff said, I think especially since 2020, the travel trends have just been all over the place. Of maybe some folks are traveling less, some folks are traveling more now as things open up. We see more maybe domestic travel. We've also seen not that Denver is like rural, but we've seen less like really big city travel and more maybe like suburban travel, that sort of thing. So I think if we're looking at some of these rates, I think there's a multitude of factors as well.
I was just shocked looking at both hotels and short-term rentals in other cities, how much they've gone up since 2-3 years ago. That's why I asked the question. So I didn't know if I was looking in all the wrong places, or if it was a more affluent society and we just have more affluent places to stay, or if maybe with Airbnb, there are greater regulations and cutting down on the quantities in some other cities right now.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of, any and all, or a couple of those. It's, yeah.
Okay. So no trends here in Denver really on that. It's a mix here too.
I would think so. I haven't looked into the data, so I don't want to say for sure or not. But if I were to guess, I think if we really wanted to understand trends, it would be maybe taking a look at the next couple years rather than taking a look at the last couple of years, just because the recovery from COVID has just made markets, and not just short-term rental, but generally fluctuate quite a bit.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I just pulled up a report I do each month. It looked like at the end of 22, the average daily rates for Denver Metro was up 4% in 2022 versus 2019. In Denver specifically, it was 5.1%. So kind of, that's not too bad given all the things that have gone on, definitely compared to the workforce and some of the increases that we've seen. I know we have felt it. I know others have felt it of the different, wage increases that we've had to do to remain competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. And you just said you are having a problem with staffing at the hotels.
Yeah, the workforce was an issue before the pandemic. It definitely is ongoing. It's at one point, I know there was general managers in the hotels that were pitching in. They were cleaning rooms, doing the different things. So workforce continues to be a thing that we focus on, I think, throughout Denver.
Mm-hmm. And what do you hear in the short-term rentals as far as workforce that supports the locations?
Well, I know that, a lot of our hosts are using maybe professional cleaners, local cleaners, that sort of thing. I can look and see if there's any type of data, but I know a lot of folks with them renting out their primary residence, worst comes to worst, they're able to help support that space themselves.
Yeah, that's what I wondered, if more of the owners are getting involved nowadays too. Yeah. Alrighty. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cindy.
Yes, thank you for the questions. I really appreciate having the experts here to give us really good information, useful information to help us to guide these discussions. I just really briefly want to mention that a couple folks mentioned the sort of region approach, right? So that obviously folks come to Denver and they travel throughout the metro area, and we saw earlier that Lakewood had adopted primary residence. I think Inglewood's looking at some regulations for short-term rentals as well. So we might bring them in just to kind of share sort of a regional perspective on how other folks are regulating short-term rentals in the Denver metro area. Any other questions, comments you want to jump in? I know there's a lot of information that we covered here in this presentation, so it might take a little bit of time for you to sit with it and digest it and come up with some things. But if there's anything kind of top of mind now, not, we can go ahead and start talking about our next meeting. So we're looking at August 8th for the next meeting. We're doing quarterly, and we had previously discussed sustainability as an issue. We've gotten bits and pieces of it here and there. Actually, on that subject, Dana, I'm not sure if you wanted to briefly talk about the recent summit that was it Rent Responsibly had related to sustainability in the market. You want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, and you can get the replays if you go to rentresponsibly.org, but it was a blend of a focus on sustainability in all its different forms and definitions, where we did a podcaster takeover. So industry podcasters and folks that are known throughout the space hosted interviews throughout the 2-day event. And then we brought on some sustainability experts that have been doing things like you mentioned a couple slides back about certifications of properties, because there just has been across the country and around the world a big move towards looking at how we can be more sustainable from an environmental standpoint. So a variety of different topics, something for everyone there that I think they'll find of interest. And then we're putting out a sustainability report, and you can now download that on the Rent Responsibly website as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the information. So we might try and bring in more of that information for our next meeting as well. We've got follow-up questions here related to some stuff for excise and licenses to look at around complaints and applications. Alex from Airbnb is going to come back with some information. Jeff's going to come back with some information. So really glad that we're asking questions and be able to follow up on those in the next meeting as well. Also, disability access we've been talking about last year. We're hoping that the question will be up and running about disability access features, possibly around July. So it might be too early to actually have data on that, but we at least might be able to share an update on the question. And actually, that might be a good time to talk about, from a host perspective, what questions they have about the question, right? So if they're filling out the application and they're not quite sure what something means, getting that kind of feedback would help us so that when we put information on the website, we're clear about what it is that we're asking and helping people get through that process. So that's another topic we could discuss. But please provide, share with us. We had some great input and requests from STRAC members in terms of this meeting, in terms of what they wanted to hear, who they wanted to hear from. So please continue to submit those requests, that input on what these meetings should be about and cover. And like I said, we threw a lot of information at you today. So if in a day or two you come up with some questions and some other topics, some other things you want to discuss, please share. Cindy, you've got your hand up, and then Councilwoman Sawyer, I see you've got your hand up, so I'll take those one at a time, and then Susan. Okay, so Councilwoman Sawyer.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you guys over at Excise and License, and also to Jeff and Alex. This was really fantastic information. And I think really gave us all a lot of useful pieces of information to start to take to move forward. I know that it was a lot of work to put it together, so I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge all of you. This was a fantastic presentation, so thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yes.
Yeah, second that in terms of our speakers. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate the appreciation. It's a two-way street, you know. So when the committee is able to weigh in, provide input, ask questions and things, it really helps us, you know, provide good content in terms of what the committee is looking for. Susan?
Yes, my comments are actually very similar to Councilwoman Sawyer. I thought it was a great meeting and great content. So thank you to Jeff and Alex and team. And then Alex, other Alex, so many Alexes. I had two topics I'd just like to throw out for consideration for our August meeting, if they fit. One is the long-term rental licensing model. We're increasingly getting more questions, like people are asking us, and we want to be, I think, meaningfully knowledgeable, and maybe even, Alex, like an FAQ document, if that's something you and Erica and the team could begin to think about putting together. I think as people are especially approaching the 2024 timeframe for individual residences, as well as anybody that it may be applicable for in the 2023 timeframe. So that's one topic that I wanted to just suggest. And the other one is the ADU task force work, that the thinking was that in June of this year, we would begin kind of implementation of the new recommendations. And I think that would be a great checkpoint opportunity as well. So just, you know, maybe you'll ask for this same wrap up at the end, but those are two topics that come to mind that might enrich the agenda as we go forward next quarter.
Great, thank you for that. Appreciate the input. Dana?
I have a host who's driving in the car and just said that they couldn't raise their hand. So let me know if a question of this nature is not permissible, but it's come up a couple times. And I think with recent legislation that was passed at the state level as well here in Colorado, if a host is denied a license and they're going to appeal their denial, does that mean they're unable to see out the future reservations they have on their calendar?
So if someone, it depends if it's a new or renewal. If it's a renewal application and the renewal is denied and they appeal that decision, they can definitely continue operating until there's final agency action on that renewal. So, you know, they can continue doing that. We can't give business or legal advice on the reservations, because obviously the host is not going to know when the final agency action is going to take place. And so by, you know, taking reservations in the future, you know, they are opening themselves up to, you know, the thought that if that denial is upheld, they may have to cancel those, right? So that's a business legal advice piece that, you know, you probably don't want our advice on, right? But yeah, they can continue to operate on a renewal if they are, you know, as long as the denial isn't like a summary suspension for health, safety, welfare issues, right? These are pretty rare, but there have been a couple, right? If your order of denial says that you have to stop operating immediately for a health, safety, welfare issue, I know we've had a couple of safety issues related to, you know, gunshots and things like that. Again, very rare, but that's the one caveat to that scenario where, you know, you could continue operating until there's final agency action.
Super, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, you still have your hand up. Is that new hand?
Oh, that's by mistake, Alex.
Okay.
I'll take it down. Thanks.
No problem at all. Anyone else that wants to weigh in on agenda topics, on the discussion that we had today, on just other questions you have from the committee point of view?
Just wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to speak today. And Alex, Erica, thanks for all your help in getting this set up so smoothly today.
Sure, no problem. Alrighty. Well, if there's nothing more from the committee's side, it doesn't look like any of the attendees have their hand up to speak. If anybody does want to speak from the audience, we provide 2 minutes for public comment, for public input. If you're unable to put your hand up in the Zoom panel there, you can also email me. And it looks like we have one person, Craig. I'm going to allow you to speak. Craig, can you hear us and can you test the mic for us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, and I'm going to go ahead and start your timer right now. Go ahead.
Okay, quick question. Is there any situation where somebody is allowed to be an STR host and they have a driver's license for a different location in Colorado?
So Craig, generally we're not going to answer direct questions about policies.
Maybe for a future meeting you can answer that.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I'd like to see competition limited to hosts. I don't want people operating illegally. So I'm just kind of curious because I heard stories where people are getting multiple locations licensed, and I just wonder, since they only have a driver's license at one location, I'm just wondering how that might be possible. But for a future meeting, thank you very much.
No, I appreciate your comment. If you do have a question about like your application or your situation, please email us. Please reach out to us. We're happy to help you, answer those questions. But you do raise just a good point about our licensing, and we'll look into that and possibly discuss at a future meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Diana, let me switch over here. All right.
Hello?
Yes, Diana, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sure can. I'm going to start your timer and you can go ahead and start your comments. Go ahead.
Okay, it doesn't affect me personally, but I have heard many short-term rental hosts complain about the primary residence rule because they have to travel for work, or they have parents living, elderly parents in other states, or various reasons they're not home enough. And I know of maybe 3 people who have been denied because of that, even though it's their driver's license, their voter registration, their utilities, everything to show that it is their legal primary residence. And that just doesn't really seem right to me. So can you respond with, isn't it okay for someone to leave home for some time?
Diana, that's a really, really broad question. The answer is yes, it's okay to leave your home for some time. All applications are reviewed for primary residence under the factors listed in our ordinance. We know and we've heard that every scenario is different. So, if someone believes that they have been found to a place not have their primary residence incorrectly, they can appeal that decision. The department has an appeal process. We were talking about that earlier. In addition, you can always appeal to district court if the director upholds the original decision. So I think without specifics, right, we appreciate the comment, but our response is going to be that that's, not everyone's going to meet all the qualifications.
Yeah, obviously it just depends, but it seemed like there was a general trend to deny people who have to travel for work. So yeah, I'd like to know more about that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Appreciate it, Diana. Next we have John Apples. John, can you hear us? And can you test your mic, please?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I'll go ahead and start your time. You can begin your comments now.
Sure, appreciate it. And to reiterate what someone else said, thank you guys for your time and all the valuable information you just provided. Following up, and I think it was just Diana's last point, I have a similar question about sort of the manner in which the primary residence rule is sort of evaluated on sort of a case-by-case basis. And my question really comes down to, I'm sort of in a similar boat in terms of I travel a lot for work, sometimes for leisure, more for work. And I had actually, I think I had called and left a message with the permit department maybe a few months ago, and basically explicitly asked them what I needed to do to ensure that I got my permit renewed, whether it was, stay under 183 days, do this, do that. Frankly, I'm an attorney myself, and I would never purposely try to violate any law or ordinance, and I have every intention of abiding by it. But I'm just not entirely sure how to do that. Is that, has the department considered that as sort of an issue in terms of not, explicitly being able to tell someone who wants to abide by the ordinance how to do so? That would seem to be problematic to me. Just from a legal standpoint, it seems like a sort of a violation of due process. You can't tell someone who wants to abide by a law how to do it explicitly.
Well, I thank you for your comment. I mean, as we've mentioned several times, those factors are listed in ordinance. We cannot give you legal advice, and we cannot read everyone's minds and know exactly what their situations are and tell them exactly how to comply. It really boils down to, and it always has, do you live there or not? If you're not sure whether you live somewhere, whether it's your primary residence, then we're not going to be able to tell you how to prove to us that it is if you're not in fact sure. So I think it does come down to everyone has different circumstances. Everyone has something different that they could show or that they could tell that would, say, hey, this is my primary residence. Here's my circumstances, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting. If we are starting to, if the information that you've provided in your application leans us that way, we give you an option. We always send out an email that says, if there's any other information you want us to consider, now's the time. This committee has always asked for flexibility, and that's the trade-off, right? We can't give clear black and white guidelines when there's flexibility in a list of factors. If you want a clear one guideline, 183-day cutoff, this committee, universally rejected that several years ago. So I also want to point out too that only 2% of our licenses are denied. So it is still a very small pool. So if you have individual questions about your individual applications, please email us at licenses@denvergov.org. If you would like to provide information about your application and you're not sure the process to do that as part of the application, we can definitely answer those questions. But again, we don't know everyone's scenarios and all the facts in your life, and we cannot give you legal advice on what to tell us that would, bring you into compliance. So that's my spiel on that.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your input. The 2 minutes are up, and so we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got 2 more speakers left. I want to make sure that the committee does get an opportunity to hear from everybody that wanted to weigh in. Sabrina Calnan, you've got your hand up. Can you test your mic for us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, your time starts now.
Awesome, thank you. First, I want to say I did really enjoy today's presentations from both Visit Denver and Airbnb. Based on the public comment that we're receiving, I think it would be a great idea to spend some time in one of these meetings to go over that ordinance again, and specifically which factors the city of Denver is looking at. It seems like there's a lot of confusion out there, and that might help with the number of questions that we're getting about applications as well. So I think that would be a good use of time. And then second, just a general observation, it seems like the hotel community and the short-term rental community are operating very separately from each other. And I think Visit Denver would be a great way to bridge that gap a little bit and bring those short-term rental stays as, part of our tourism offering to people who are coming to Denver for various reasons.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments, Sabrina. Alrighty, and then next we have Sergio. Let me unmute Sergio. Sergio, can you hear us, and can you test your mic for us? Sergio, are you able to speak to test the mic? Sergio, one more time. Can you hear us? Can you speak? We're not able to hear you. Sergio, the other option that we have is you can provide written comments. If you email me, it's alex.vidal, VIDAL, at denvergov.org. I'm happy to provide your written comments to the committee. I do that before each meeting. Sorry that we're unable to hear your testimony. And then lastly, we've got Joshua. Joshua, can you hear us and can you test your mic for us? Joshua? One more call for Joshua. Are you able to hear us? Can you test your mic? Okay, Joshua, same comment. You can provide written comments by emailing me. You can also email licenses@denvergov.org. And we're happy to provide your written comments to the committee, which may be easier since there's no time limit there. Sergio, is that you that we're overhearing?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I'll go ahead and give you 2 minutes, and that'll be the close.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you guys so much.
Oh, now you cut out.
To the city.
Are you still speaking?
Tourism and everything else that
Sergio, you're cutting out. We really can't hear much of what you're saying, unfortunately.
Let's call it the primary residency issue. And I heard somebody talked about not knowing specific situations and this. Compliance should be as simple as black and white. We should know exactly if we're compliant or not, and not, we got to take some of this subjectivity out of this process so people know exactly whether or not they're compliant. A lot of us want to, just not a lot of clarification on what compliance is, especially when it's up to someone's opinion on what primary residence really means.
Thank you, Sergio. We did. I think we caught the gist of what you were getting at here. Is similar to the other comments that were made. If you do want to submit written comments, please do so, because you cut out a little bit here and there. But I think we did get the gist of what you were commenting on there. We are right at time, folks, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. That this is a volunteer committee, so we appreciate your time and your input. Really great discussion, really great information. We'll start planning for the next meeting in August. But in the meantime, please submit comments, questions, input on agenda and the like. And I think we got some good input during this committee meeting today. But doesn't have to start and end today. We've got the time between meetings as well. So really appreciate everybody's time. Glad everybody was able to make it and weigh in, ask good questions. And if there's nothing more, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting, and we'll see you all in August, if not sooner.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.